What do you do when the very place meant to protect your soul becomes the stage for its destruction? It was supposed to be the safest day of her life. The white dress, the vows, the blessing of God before the eyes of family and friends. Clara Duval stood at the church altar with trembling hands, believing she was walking into forever. But beneath the hymns, beneath the holy words whispered into the rafters, there was something else, something dark clawing its way into the ceremony. The church bell tolled, steady, solemn. The stained glass windows painted the pews in colors of innocence, reds, blues, golds. Yet every flicker of light seemed to hide a shadow. Every smile seemed rehearsed. Every blessing carried weight Clara could not name. And then there was Father Elias. His voice echoed through the sanctuary as he began the prayer. Deep, commanding, reverent. But to Clara, every word landed heavy, like chains locking around her. She had confessed her doubts to him only days before. Doubts about Jonas. Doubts about what she'd seen in his eyes when he thought no one was watching. Doubts about what love meant when fear was already woven into its foundation. And now, that secret lay between bride and priest like a live wire. In the first pew sat Margaret Reyes, the widow draped in black. Her face pale, her eyes swollen from years of sleepless nights. No one looked at her, no one spoke to her, but she was there. Like a storm cloud the town could never chase away. She had warned them once before. She had begged someone to listen when her husband died after whispering a secret to Father Elias. And now, as she clutched her rosary, her knuckles white, she saw the same patterns replaying before her. Jonas Hale, the groom, wore his uniformed smile, the smile of the town's beloved officer. But his hand around Clara's seemed too tight, too claiming, more like possession than promise. His jaw twitched whenever Margaret's eyes lingered on him, whenever Father Elias's voice dipped low, and Sister Miriam watched from the side aisle, her hands folded, her lips pressed thin. She had kept her silence for decades, protecting the church, protecting Father Elias from whispers that should never have been buried. She prayed harder now, but even she knew prayers were not going to stop what was already set in motion. The vows began. Jonas's lips parted, the first words of forever resting on his tongue. But before he could speak, Margaret Reyes stood. Her voice broke the silence like shattered glass. You can't bless this union, not while blood still stains this altar. Gasps swept the pews. Clara froze. Father Elias's eyes, calm, collected, flicked toward her. And in that moment, the wedding was no longer holy. It had become a trial. What happens when the truth no one wanted to hear finally forces its way into the light? The church froze. For a moment, not even the candles dared to flicker. Margaret's voice, shaking, breaking, but defiant, rose above the silence that smothered the pews. You all sit here pretending this is holy, she said, her words trembling but cutting deep. But do you not remember the blood this church already buried? Do you not remember the man who dared to speak and never came home? The congregation stirred uneasily, whispers hissing like serpents through the crowd. Faces turned away. Others stared. But no one interrupted her. Margaret clutched the rosary tighter, her knuckles whitening. The beads rattled in her hand, each one a memory, each one a scream that had gone unheard. Her eyes, red, hollow from years of grief, locked on Father Elias. He told you his secret, Father, she cried. He trusted you with it. And the next day, I buried him. Clara's chest tightened. The bride's veil felt heavier now, pressing against her throat. Her eyes darted to Jonas, who stood rigid beside her, his jaw clenched, his grip around her hand like iron. But he didn't look at her. He stared straight ahead, his eyes dark, unreadable. The pews behind them shifted in discomfort. Mothers shielded children's ears, though curiosity kept them from moving. Old men shook their heads, muttering about hysteria. But Clara couldn't move. She couldn't breathe, because Margaret's voice didn't sound like madness. It sounded like truth. Father Elias raised his hand, his face unshaken, his tone deliberate, measured, like a surgeon's blade. "Margaret," he said gently, "grief can poison the heart. This is not the time, nor the place." But his calm only poured gasoline on her rage. "Not the time? Not the place?" she snapped. "I've waited 5 years for the time. I've stood in the back of this church, week after week, while you preached forgiveness, while you buried my cries beneath hymns. And now you dare to bless this union." Her eyes darted, past Father Elias, past Clara, and landed squarely on Jonas. "Ask him," she said, her voice breaking but rising louder. "Ask Jonas what he swore he'd never speak of. Ask him what my husband found that night. Ask him why my children still sleep with nightmares." Jonas's chest heaved, the muscles in his jaw flexing hard enough to split stone. His hand on Clara's wrist tightened, not protective, restraining. Clara flinched. She whispered, almost too soft to hear, "Jonas, what is she talking about?" But Jonas didn't answer. He didn't blink. His silence spoke louder than words, and in that silence, the first seed of terror planted itself in Clara's heart. The congregation erupted, half in defense, half in disbelief. Voices clashed, gasps filled the sanctuary, but Margaret's cry cut through them all. "You can marry him if you dare. But know this, your vows will be written in blood, just like mine were." The bride's bouquet slipped from Clara's trembling hands, petals scattering across the altar steps. And in that moment, her wedding stopped being a promise and became a sentence. How do you say forever when doubt has already taken the first vow for you? The church was still buzzing with Margaret's cry, the words refusing to die, echoing in every ear. "Your vows will be written in blood." Clara's hands trembled so violently she could barely hold her veil in place. Her bouquet already lay scattered at her feet, petals broken beneath the polished shoes of her groom. She dared to glance at Jonas, and in that single glance, something inside her collapsed. His jaw was locked, his lips pressed into a hard line, his stare fixed not on her, but on Margaret, as if she were the only threat in the room. His grip on Clara's wrist was so tight it left pale crescents in her skin, a grip that felt less like love and more like possession. "Jonas," she whispered, barely daring to breathe. "Please, tell me it isn't true." But silence fell heavier than any answer. Father Elias stepped forward, his voice booming in a practiced calm, the kind of calm that smothered rather than soothed. "The house of God is not a court," he declared. "This is a wedding, not a trial. We will not allow grief to poison this holy day." But Clara caught it, the flicker, the way his eyes dropped, not toward Margaret, not toward Jonas, but toward the altar itself, as though some memory lay buried there, something that couldn't be spoken. Her stomach twisted. What had Margaret's husband confessed to him? And why did Father Elias's face now look like stone about to crack? Margaret's voice trembled, but it did not waver. She clutched the crucifix at her neck as though she could strangle truth from it. "I begged for help. I begged this church to see me. But every Sunday, they told me to pray harder, to forgive faster. They silenced me. They silenced my children. And now you will silence her too." Her finger shot toward Clara, her whole body shaking as she cried out, "Bride, do you see it? Do you not feel it? The grip of a man who cannot let go. The same grip that left my husband cold in the ground." Gasps rippled like thunder across the pews. A child whimpered. The church was no longer holy. It was trembling on the edge of chaos. Jonas finally broke his silence, his voice low, guttural, cutting through the sanctuary like a blade. "Enough!" He turned not to Clara, not to the priest, but to Margaret, the widow whose grief had become his undoing. His eyes burned with something unholy, something that stripped the uniform from his body and showed the man beneath. "You think grief gives you license to spit lies in God's house?" he growled. "You've cursed this town long enough." But his rage only betrayed him. Clara felt it. Not in his words, but in his grip, now bruising her skin. A silent confession written in pain. And then Clara did what no one expected. She pulled her hand free. Gasps broke out again, sharper, louder. the bride, in white, stepping back from her groom in front of God, in front of the priest, in front of the whole town. Her veil quivered with her breath, her eyes locked not on Margaret, not on Father Elias, but on Jonas. "If you have nothing to hide," she whispered, voice trembling but rising with courage, "then swear it here. Swear before God that she lies." The church fell dead silent, every ear strained, every heart pounded. But Jonas Hale said nothing. What is more terrifying, the confession of guilt, or the silence that refuses to deny it? The church waited, every breath held hostage. Clara's demand still hung in the air. "Swear before God that she lies." Jonas did not speak. His lips parted, but no words came. His chest rose and fell with the sharp rhythm of a man cornered. His silence stretched, pulling the room tighter, until even the flicker of candle flames seemed to recoil. For Clara, each second of silence felt like a lifetime unraveling. The man she loved, the man she trusted, stood beside her. Yet every heartbeat screamed that trust was already dead. Margaret's sob cracked through the stillness. She had waited years for this moment, years of ridicule, whispers, isolation. And now, his silence gave her what no priest, no congregation, no town elder had ever given her: validation. "Do you hear him?" she cried, her voice breaking, echoing through the vaulted rafters. "Do you hear the silence of a guilty man? I carried the truth in my chest until it burned holes in me, and all of you called me mad. All of you turned away. But now you cannot deny it. Not when his silence is louder than my grief." The pews stirred with unease. Some lowered their eyes, ashamed. Others leaned forward, their faces hungry for a spectacle. And some, still clinging to their loyalty, shook their heads in disbelief. Father Elias stepped closer to the altar, his hand raised, his tone sharp this time, his patience fractured. "This is not the way," he said, his voice cutting through the crowd. "This is the house of God, not the court of men. We will not condemn one of our own based on emotion and grief." But his words rang hollow. Even the most devout could see it, the flicker in his eyes, the strain in his voice. He was not defending Jonas alone. He was defending himself, his pulpit, his silence. And that silence began to look less like protection, and more like complicity. Clara's veil trembled with the force of her breath. Her throat burned with questions she could not contain. "Jonas," she whispered again, her voice softer this time, but drenched in pain. "If you love me, if you ever loved me, then speak. Tell me she lies." Her eyes searched his face, desperate for the man she once believed in, the man she dreamed of marrying. But what she found instead was a mask cracking, piece by piece, revealing something darker beneath. Jonas's hand twitched, his fists clenched. Still no words. Clara's heart sank. And in that sinking came terror, the kind of terror that doesn't scream but whispers. You don't know the man standing next to you. From the side aisle, Sister Miriam pressed her hands harder together, her lips moving in frantic prayer. Her voice, low but audible, spilled into the tense air. "Lord, forgive us. Forgive what we buried. Forgive what we allowed." The words slipped like cracks in stone, exposing more than prayer. Clara's head turned sharply toward her. So did Margaret's. The nun's whispered confession sliced through the last strands of denial like a knife. The congregation gasped. A holy woman, a lifelong servant, begging forgiveness not for others, but for herself. Clara's knees weakened. Her hand reached for the altar to steady herself, her veil falling sideways, her tears blurring the stained glass light into streaks of blood red and gold. "Tell me the truth," she pleaded, her voice breaking, echoing through the church. "What secret are you all hiding from me?" Jonas stood frozen. Father Elias's jaw tightened. Sister Miriam lowered her head, trembling. And in that silence, every guest in the church realized the same chilling truth. This was not a wedding anymore. It was a reckoning. What happens when the man sworn to protect shows the world the violence he's been hiding all along? The boiling point, Clara's question still echoed. What secret are you all hiding from me? No one moved. No one answered. The silence burned hotter than any flame. Then Jonas's hand slammed against the altar. The crack of wood shot through the church like a gunshot, jolting every soul from their seat. His face twisted. Rage, fear, humiliation, all clashing together in the eyes of a groom unmasked. He turned, his voice rising, deep and guttural. Enough of this circus. Enough of these lies. But his anger didn't clear the air, poisoned it. His fury was not the defense of an innocent man. It was the eruption of someone cornered. The widow strikes back. Margaret rose higher in the pews, her black veil trembling with every sharp breath. Lies? She spat, her voice cracking with years of buried grief. You call it lies because the truth terrifies you. My husband knew Jonas. He told me your name before he died. And now you dare to stand before this altar as if your hands are clean. Her finger pointed at him, trembling but unshaken. You think silence will protect you? It only condemns you further. The congregation stirred again. Mothers clutching children, men whispering fiercely, some rising to leave, others leaning closer as if unable to look away. Clara's breaking heart. Clara staggered back, her veil slipping, her face bare to the room. Her voice shook, trembling between desperation and disbelief. Jonas, please, she begged. Don't let this be true. Don't make me believe I've been standing beside a stranger. But Jonas's eyes didn't soften. His jaw locked tighter. His silence was a coffin being nailed shut. Every memory of his touch, every promise, every tender word, suddenly twisted into something darker. Clara's stomach churned. Her heart screamed. The man she thought was her safe place was now the man she feared most. The priest loses his grip. Father Elias stepped forward, his hand raised in command, his voice sharp. Enough! The sound of it silenced the pews, but not the fury in the air. His robes trembled as he pointed toward Margaret. You will not destroy this day with your bitterness, he declared. God is witness here, and I will not allow this sanctuary to be turned into a grave for accusations. But Clara saw it again, the flicker in his eyes. Not conviction, not strength, fear. The priest wasn't shielding God's house. He was shielding himself. Sister Miriam breaks. And then, like a dam bursting, Sister Miriam's voice cut through the room, trembling, weak, but undeniable. No, she whispered, louder this time. It is not her bitterness. It is our sin. The church gasped. Her hands trembled as she clutched her rosary, her lips quivering. We buried what should have been spoken. We turned away from justice to protect what we thought was holy. And now the blood cries out from the altar itself. Clara's knees buckled. Margaret's sobs turned to cries of vindication. Jonas's face drained of color. Father Elias froze. The congregation erupted into chaos, half crying out in prayer, half demanding answers, every voice a storm that rattled the very walls of the church. And in the chaos, Clara screamed over them all, her voice raw, her heart breaking, her soul demanding the one thing she feared to hear. Jonas Hale, what did you do? The groom's fists trembled. His silence shattered at last, replaced not by denial, not by defense, but by a roar. I did what had to be done. Gasps tore the sanctuary apart. Clara's world collapsed, and the wedding became a battlefield. What if the only voice left of someone was written in ink? And what if those words, her last words, told you she already knew she was in danger? The investigators almost overlooked it. Buried beneath the clutter of her small wooden desk was a faded leather-bound diary. At first glance, it looked ordinary. Pages filled with everyday notes, small scribbles about work, chores, even the weather. But then, just halfway through, the tone shifted. Her handwriting grew shaky, rushed, as though every line had been written in fear. She wrote about shadows outside her window, a car that followed her home more than once, footsteps she swore she heard at night, though no one else seemed to notice. She wrote about how the people around her dismissed her fears, telling her she was overthinking, or too anxious. But there was one entry, dated just 3 days before she was gone, that made the blood run cold. She wrote, "If anything happens to me, it will not be an accident. I need someone to believe me. Please, don't let my story end with silence." It wasn't paranoia. It wasn't exaggeration. It was a desperate warning that no one heard in time. The investigators turned those fragile pages with trembling hands, each line painting a picture of a woman surrounded by threats no one else seemed to see. Each word was not just a journal entry, it was evidence. Her private fear had now become the loudest testimony of all. And yet, as powerful as her diary was, it also raised chilling questions. Who did she fear most? Who was she trying to warn the world about? And why, if she knew, didn't she write their name? Because maybe, deep down, she knew the truth. Naming them might have sealed her fate even faster. So I ask you, what's more terrifying? That she predicted her own end? Or that the very pages she left behind are still hiding the identity of the person who silenced her forever? Have you ever wondered what it feels like to stand in front of someone who admits to destroying lives, and yet shows no flicker of remorse? That was the moment investigators faced when the final truth clawed its way into the light. The man they had chased, the one who for years had slipped through shadows and silence, sat across from them with nothing more than a cold smirk on his face. His words weren't filled with regret. They were dripping with something far darker. "Yes," he said quietly, almost whispering. "I did it, and I'd do it again." Those words weren't just a confession. They were a curse, a sentence of endless grief for every family who had waited for answers. A knife twisted in wounds that never truly healed. And yet, this was the moment the case finally broke open. Every sleepless night of investigation, every lead chased into dead ends, every family member who refused to give up, it all built to this one exchange. But here's the question that still chills the room, even decades later. Why confess at all? Some said he wanted control even in the end, that revealing the truth on his terms gave him one last taste of power. Others believed guilt had finally eaten through his carefully constructed mask. But the truth? No one really knows. And maybe that's the most terrifying part. Because when someone can look into your eyes and admit to unthinkable crimes without blinking, what does that say about the evil human beings are truly capable of? For the families, the confession brought a strange kind of closure. They finally had answers, but answers don't bring back the dead. They don't erase the sound of an unanswered phone call or the memory of an empty seat at the dinner table. Closure isn't peace. It's just the knowledge that the nightmare is real. And as the courtroom doors closed, as the gavel came down, one truth remained. Evil doesn't vanish into the dark. It lingers. It leaves scars. It forces us to face the question no one wants to ask. How well do you really know the people around you? Some stories end with justice. Others end with silence. But this one, it ends with a reminder. A reminder that sometimes the monsters we fear the most are not strangers lurking in the night. They are the ones who smile when they finally tell you what they've done. Subscribe to the Veil of Secret, because some truths should never stay buried.